Welcome, everyone, to the latest Detroit Lions Lone Wolves podcast. Christian and I are here to preview Detroit Lions rookie minicamp. It's unbelievable, Christian. After the draft, you recognize that the calendar doesn't stop. You realize that the NFL is talking already about next a draft is going to take place in Washington, trying to break the Lions record. You realize league business is always going on, and it's still a time to recap the draft. You're doing a great job checking out some of the early film of some of the top picks. This episode, you're going to break down a little bit of what you've learned through some of your film review. We're going to talk about Aidan Hutchinson. We got a chance now to see his latest workout video, causing a little bit of a stir regarding what people saw and how they interpreted the workout video, and it caused a little bit of a debate online. We're going to talk about what we're going to see this Friday. I'll be out at Allen Park at the Performance Center to check out rookie minicamp. We're going to lay our eyes finally on the rookies, where certain guys maybe start to, I think most notably people are interested in the cross training of the offensive linemen. How do they look early on against first, second year guys? So it's going to be interesting to see some of the workouts. Look, it's not full padded, but it'll be an opportunity to see their athleticism, how they make plays and things like that. And then we're going to talk about just the standard stuff that you kind of at this point in the season talk about. Could there be some free agents that still help the Lions roster? So lots to get to, Christian. And so I'm very curious. Let's start with this. After the Lions draft, you now get a sense, a full range of reactions from the fans that love the draft, that understand that they support the team, and they see a lot of the silver linings, the positivity about a lot of the picks. No problems there. There's a lot of good things to talk about, but still, there's still across the league. And I think it has largely similarly due to those that critique the Lions. They still haven't won a Super Bowl. And many people wonder, okay, what happened in 24 outside of the injuries? And people are wondering, okay, in 2023, 2024, the Lions had a prime opportunity to make some noise and have success. I think 24, you can clearly see the impact of the injuries, but a lot of the math analysts, a lot of draft pundits, I don't typically fall in that category in regards to draft value. I just look at, could you have drafted a better player, a more ready player for your football team? But the Lions earned an F based on value, and it's really interesting. Perceived reaching for a lot of spots because of the fact that Brad Holmes gave up multiple third-round picks for Isaac TeSlaa, the fact that he moved up a couple times in this draft. What do you make of the heavy criticism? I was shocked that, I could expect a B- C in some areas. I was shocked to see the Lions get an F grade by a draft analyst.
Yeah, I think it's all pretty subjective at this stage. I think the tough part that even we have when it comes to evaluating different draft classes is just the fact that it's all relative to our own opinion, right? Like we all have our own ideals for where we want the Lions to go, and let's face it, Brad Holmes doesn't really care what any of us think in terms of what they're going to do in the draft. They've always kind of done it their way, and we've seen it work out with guys like Jahmyr Gibbs. I mean, we were all stunned when they took Jahmyr Gibbs 12th overall. He's turned out to be one of the best running backs in the league 2 years into his career. You look a little bit further down the line, Jack Campbell is another one of the guys who are like, wow, here comes a linebacker in the first round, 18th overall, and he's turned out to be pretty good as well. So I think what Holmes has done to this point in his career as general manager has worked, and so for that, he deserves a little bit of the benefit of the doubt for some of these moves that he's made. Yes, when you look at the big boards, Isaac TeSlaa is a 4th to 5th round projection. The Lions trade up 30 spots in the 3rd round to go get him. That's a little bit of a shocker, but evidently they have a plan for him. And I think some of it goes back to the fact that maybe they just didn't feel great about this year's draft class. So we'll have to see it play out. But as far as my reaction to seeing them get an F, when you look at the criteria they did it upon, and it was all based on the consensus big board and where these players were selected. And so, like the Lions are down there in terms of overall value with their selections and where these guys are at on the big board. So, yes, some of their picks have been labeled a reach. I wouldn't go as far as to say so myself, but so they did make some out of the box moves in this year's draft. And so, they're going to catch a little bit of flack for it, but I think that with Holmes' success in the draft, he does deserve a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. Now, I will say before we move on, if these picks don't pan out, he's going to quickly lose that benefit of the doubt just as fast as he earned it. So this is a huge draft class for him because of how they handled it. They did make these out of the box moves, and now there's going to be some scrutiny on him if these picks don't work out.
Yeah, and I think here's the thing is that the Lions in their evaluation are willing to take guys that still need some more development in certain spots. Now, all players have strengths and weaknesses, and I think with TeSlaa, people still think that he's got work to do in his route running and his ability to break free from the line of scrimmage and coverage. So there's some things that people say, okay, they look at it and they look at other players. For example, people are looking and they say, okay, one of the questions most notably asked is, okay, if you didn't take TeSlaa, who could you have taken? Potentially, Elic Ayominor from Stanford was there. And many people say, okay, yeah, comparatively, Alec may have been a player more ready to start now and maybe even a better player that could come in sooner that maybe you didn't need to trade up for. And that's the tough part is that, there is a lot of subjective nature in regards to, hey, could a player have been there? But what the Lions do is they find guys that they like and they say, we want this player, and they're aggressive. And here's the part that now we'll talk about too, maybe here in a moment. But what do you make of those that say maybe with the wide receiver spot in TeSlaa and Ahmed Hassanian, there could have been better players taken earlier that are more ready, maybe not fitting every criteria, but maybe more ready to step in 25 to help?
Yeah, I do think that's a valid argument, but I think that the way that Holmes has done things in the past goes to show you that he has his guys. And they're very thorough with how they go about the draft process. And they want their guys to check every single box. So yeah, there were other options. You mentioned A Manor. Like he's a guy who maybe checked every box but two or three, and that's why the Lions went the way they did. So I do think that a lot of it is just the way that Brad Holmes is going to do things. And he's hit on picks like this in the past. So like I said, he's got that benefit of the doubt right now. With that being said, if TeSlaa doesn't figure it out or doesn't adapt well to the Lions offense, this is going to be looked at as a bad pick. And there are picks that he's made that you kind of see the vision and you're like, okay, I'm going to trust Brad on this one. But like Broderick Martin's played in 5 games in 2 years. Like he's an example of a move that Holmes wanted to get a player at the position. This is his guy. He goes out and gets him, and it just hasn't worked out to this point. Now, there could be a point in time where Broderick Martin plays a big role for the Lions in 2025, but I think with the moves they've made in the offseason, they signed DJ Reader last offseason, Roy Lopez this offseason, and then drafted Tyreek Williams. I don't think Broderick Martin's going to have a significant role, at least right away. So moves like that are going to be scrutinized. Anytime you make a move, like a trade up, a trade down, that comes with extra attention on you when you're the general manager. So, like I said, this is a draft that could go down as a defining one for Brad Holmes because his job is different now. It's not about finding the best available option in terms of you're picking in the top 10 or you have 2 first-round picks, so you have more swings. It's like, no, now you're picking 28th. You have to find good players where you're picking. Otherwise, because you're not going to be able to pay everybody, so you need the draft to replenish your young depth year in and year out. So I like I said, this is going to be one that you look back upon when we evaluate Brad Holmes 5-10 years down the road and what was his tenure like. This is going to be a defining draft for sure.
Now, what's interesting is the fact that a video surfaced that was real intriguing. The Baltimore Ravens GM, Eric DeCosta, came out and was speaking about draft strategy. And he referenced a really heavily researched article that kind of talks about, general managers that kind of maybe don't have enough research to make the claim that being so aggressive is worthwhile. So it was very interesting because, in essence, and you can go check out the video and do your research on the article. It's an in-depth 17-page research. I read it all. It's very intriguing because it presents a different opinion. And Eric DeCosta's opinion, which is really great. It would be interesting if ever Brad Holmes and Eric DeCosta got to sit down and hash this all out. It would be very interesting because Eric DeCosta said, look, in essence, the difference between, evaluating players at different spots is not that great. So trading up is really not worth it. His opinion was the idea is when there's really not that much differentiating a small cluster of players, the way in which you improve success is improving the number of chances that you get to hit on a player. So his formula in essence is trading up might not be as successful as trading down, getting more picks. And then you look at what the Eagles did. How many picks did the Eagles have in this last draft? 10. So what that strategy indicates is a different philosophy than Brad Holmes, which is Brad Holmes' strategy, which is still successful. It's just a different way of looking at it, which is, hey, if we find players that fit us, what our needs are, we want them no matter what it takes. Trading 2 third-round picks, Brad Holmes says, I don't value the players being as good as maybe an Amon-Ra St. Brown 4 years ago in the 4th round. There's a different level of talent that I'm not seeing based on his evaluation that he's willing to part ways. DeCosta has a different view. What did you make of that when you watched that video, reading about it? It was very interesting because it lends a little bit more to what I think is that, the difference between a couple players in my mind, excuse me, is not that great based on how Brad Holmes is presenting it. But at the same token, I like the way that guys like Howie Roseman and DeCosta get down. But also, too, you can make the argument the Ravens haven't had as much playoff success in recent years. What did you make of what DeCosta said? I thought it was a very interesting idea that he presented.
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing with that argument is that you have more capital, you have more resources to be able to do the things you want in the draft. And whether that's drafting 10 guys and taking a bunch of swings, or whether that's making a package and moving up and going and getting that guy you want. Like, those are both arguments that can be made off of that same strategy, because at the end of the day, the draft picks are arguably the most valuable resource that a lot of these GMs have. Because like I know we still see player for player type of trades in the NFL, but I think the days of swapping superstars and things like that, I think that day is over. And instead, if you want to go get a superstar, you got to give up a lot of draft picks. And so accumulating all these resources is wise. It's a good strategy. And so I can definitely see the value in somebody like DeCosta thinking that, okay, we don't need to trade up. Let's be that team that everybody wants to trade up with, so that we can just continue to stockpile all these picks. Because at some point, you've got to make a move. Like, let's face it, where the Lions roster is at right now, it's no guarantee that these 7th round picks that they have are going to even make the roster. And so with picks like that, you have to understand going into the draft, okay, we have, if they sit down at their meeting, they're like, okay, we have like 9 roster spots available. There's no sense in making 10 picks, because you've got one of these guys isn't going to make a team, or they're going to push somebody else out. So I do think that there's value in stockpiling picks, because in a roundabout way almost, I think that it is the best way to make the moves you want, is to have all these picks. I'm not as big of a fan of, okay, let's just load up on draft picks and pick 10 guys or 11 guys, just because I don't think that all these guys are going to bring that sort of value to your team, as to where if you package a couple of 6th or 7th rounders and move up into the 4th or the 5th because you like a guy in that round, like, that to me helps you more than standing pat and taking 2 guys in the 7th round that might not even make your team. So I do see the argument and I do understand it. I just think that when you get all these picks, that would be in my opinion, the prime opportunity to go make the move. Rather than if you're sitting there with 4 picks and your well is dry, like that's to me when you should be looking to stockpile. I think it's all kind of comes in waves. I wouldn't be surprised if the Lions, find a way to somehow get back into the 3rd round in next year's draft, even though they traded both of their 3rd round picks. But that to me is kind of the interesting portion of all this is, how do you use this year's picks, but also how do you use next year's picks in this year's draft? So a lot of different ways that teams approach the draft. It's so much fun to learn about how each team kind of has their own styles. And it's part of the reason the draft is so much fun.
No doubt about it. And it's interesting because there's a lot of different ways to build a roster, and the Lions have their firm strategy, and it's hard to argue because they've turned their franchise around to be a perennial playoff team, had a chance to be in the NFC Championship game. And so the Lions also are thinking, based on this strategy, hey, we still drafted a lot of good players that were hurt last year. So now let's have an opportunity to see what their full potential is one more time if they get on the lucky side of injuries. So now the Detroit Lions are going to turn the page and they're going to hold their rookie minicamp. It's going to take place this upcoming weekend, and the media will be out there on Friday. We'll get a chance to look at the 7 draft picks and a lot of undrafted free agents as well, to see how they move around the field, how they handle the media, how they handle the early competition out there at the professional level. Hopefully the weather in Michigan, this rainy weather, cooperates this weekend. Hopefully the weather turns around and we get a little bit better temperature, so we get a chance to see what this football team is about. But if the weather's inclement, they'll practice indoors. So we'll see. We'll get a chance to see how these athletic athletes. This is really, when you look at it, the Lions drafted, I think, the 10th highest rated athletic draft in terms of RAS score. So this is a football team that, fits the criteria of what Brad Holmes wanted. Your early thoughts about rookie minicamp. What are one or two big storylines you're going to want to pay attention to? For me, I think clearly what a lot of people are paying attention to, the two big ones, and you probably will agree, and maybe you can add a different one as well. Want to see how Ahmed Hassanian looks out there in his first action out there against competition at the next level. And I want to see how the young offensive linemen look that are available out there. I want to see Miles Frazier, Tate Ratledge. I want to see them hopefully working on both sides, running around athletic, seeing how their footwork is, their speed, and their power ability. So I'm looking forward to getting a sense of how these athletes are going to perform. And then clearly, everyone wants to see how the undrafted free agents work out and who emerges, who becomes the darling of training camp, as every year somebody does emerge. And it's going to be a great opportunity to see the football team for the first time in following the NFL draft. What interests you ahead of the upcoming rookie minicamp?
Yeah, a couple things. Number one, who is going to be that training camp darling that we have every single year with the undrafted free agents? Last year, Isaiah Williams was one. Lauren Strickland was one that caught a lot of people's eyes, especially, that started rookie mini camp and then into training camp. Guys like that maybe flew under the radar in the pre-draft process, or teams just kind of had them too far down their boards, but all of a sudden in rookie minicamp, you see their talent and you're reminded why these guys were so coveted and signed so early in the undrafted free agent process. A couple of guys that come to mind: Jackson Meeks from Syracuse, just a big-bodied receiver, really good in contested situations. I believe he had 21 contested catches last year, or 21 opportunities. I have to double-check that number. But just a really, really solid athlete, physical, not the fastest guy, but with his size, he fits a need for the Lions. Mason Miller is another one from North Dakota State, where, maybe his teammate Grace Zabel got all the attention and all the shine. He was a first-round pick, but Mason Miller was a really good player for a long time, an All-American at the FCS level, somebody who could really potentially challenge maybe Dan Skipper for that swing tackle job if he sticks at tackle, and if not, he's right in the mix at guard. So, and then the other thing, like you mentioned, the offensive lineman, but I want to see if the Lions tip their hand a little bit regarding the two young guards, Tate Ratledge and Miles Frazier. I want to see if they do any sort of team stuff or they line it up 5-on-5, whether it's walkthrough. I want to see who's at right guard, because that's the position that's open right now with Kevin Zeitler gone. I want to see if it's Ratledge or Frazier at right guard, and I want to see if the Lions are going to tip their hand a little bit as to who could be kind of the front runner when they start competing for that position in training camp. So there's a lot to keep an eye on, but I do think that the offensive line, with both the draft picks, the undrafted free agents they've brought in, just kind of to see them all in the mix together. And then also, let's not forget, the Lions signed wide receiver Caden Davis last year as a rookie minicamp tryout player. Will there be anybody that maybe we haven't seen or maybe hasn't been reported as far as signings go with the training camp or the minicamp invites? Is one of those guys earn a roster spot heading into training camp? Dylan Drummond was another one who did that, where he earned his spot based on his rookie minicamp performance. So really looking forward to seeing how it all plays out as far as who are my under the radar guys that everybody's going to be rooting for to make the roster in training camp.
Yeah, it's interesting too. Last year it kicked off with defensive end Matthew Betts, and it
Yeah.
was intriguing because James Houston, when he went down with injury, kind of kicked off the idea of who's going to play opposite of Aidan, because everyone was excited. And I think that's another reason why people are excited. They got a little tease with James Houston in those couple game stretch where he got 8 sacks after Thanksgiving, and people were like, "Oh, this looks nice." Aidan on one side and somebody that can be a sack master on the other side. That's where we got a little bit of a tease. And that's where it sparked everybody's interest. And then people were wondering if Betts was going to make the team. So I'm very curious who will be the camp darlings. But speaking of the draft and speaking of the players that were selected by the Detroit Lions, we're going to get a chance to see the 7 draft picks. And I do think that there's going to be a lot of intrigue regarding Isaac TeSlaa. Clearly, Tyleik Williams is going to be, I want to see the freakishly athletic movement that his defensive line coach talked about. I mean, he put a high standard. He said, the defensive line coach, when I had asked when we had a chance to have the meeting with Tyleik, there was a chance to talk to his position coach. And I said, look, we're hearing the comparison to Ali McNeil. Is there anybody else that you kind of get a reminder of when you look at Tyreek Williams? And he said, yeah, his movement is like Aaron Donald. And then he tried to kind of taper the expectation, but everybody's eyebrow raised like, whoa, you're talking about Aaron Donald. So you've had a chance now to look at the early, I think the top 3 picks with TeSlaa, Tate Ratledge, and Tyreek Williams, all 3 there that were selected, at the top of the draft for the Detroit Lions in terms of their board. What did you make of your early assessment from what you saw in film from some of the top picks of the Lions? Do you see the immediate impact? I probably presume that you think that Tate Ratledge and Tyreek Williams will have more of the immediate impact. But what did you see on film from some of the Lions' top picks? And keep checking in with Lions on SI as we do more throughout the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think we'll start with Tyreek Williams. To me, the run stuffing, the ability to eat up gaps, like things like that, like none of that's been oversold. Like he is that guy in the run game. Super physical with his hands. He does a really good job with leverage and getting inside of the hands of the offensive lineman and then using his strength to push them back, whether that's just to clog a run game or that's to disengage and go make a play on a ball carrier. Really impressed with his ability in that aspect of the game. I think some of the struggles in pass rush just come from the fact that he's seeing multiple bodies. Being kind of that nose tackle type of player, you're going to see, if you're going the right, you're going to see the center and the right guard. If you're going to the left side, you're going to see the center and the left guard. And so sometimes he does have a hard time getting off those blocks, but I do think there's a lot of upside there just because of how well he uses his hands. And he plays super hard. Like he has a motor that's going to fit in Detroit really, really well. So I'm really excited to see where he goes from there as far as his development as a pass rusher. And then just how much do the Lions use him? You've heard a lot of people say that he needs to be in a rotation to be effective. And the Lions do have that ability with DJ Reader and Roy Lopez to kind of play him one down at a time or play him one play out of every 3. So I'm thinking that's where he's going to be to start, with the potential to either play next to DJ Reader in run first downs where you're giving your defense 600 some pounds right in the middle. Good luck running up the middle. Like you've got 600 pounds of man down there ready to stop you. And then what does he give you in the pass rush? Is he able to get 1 or 2 sacks? Like I think anything above that bar is a complete bonus as a rookie for him. For Tate Ratledge, I think he's very, very smooth. To me, all of his fundamentals are pretty sound. He's not the easiest mover, but I think in terms of his game, his technique is so sound. Like you can look at him and be like, okay, that guy's got it. He's very, very smooth just in terms of how he handles pass protection. And then when he gets out there and gets to that second level, he can really inflict some punishment on whether it's linebackers, safeties. He can get out there and make guys move. So he's somebody who has immediate starter upside right away. He'll have to compete for that job. That's how the Lions do things. But I do think of the 2 draft picks, he's got the better chance of starting right away, just because to me his game is so refined. As far as room to grow, I'm not so certain that there's going to be a ton of upside there, but he's got a very, very high floor, and he can help the Lions out for a long time. And then TeSlaa to finish it out. Listen, TeSlaa was an interesting case study. When I was going through part of my process, I watched the film, but I also, look at the PFF stuff just to get reference points on snap counts and how are they using him, especially with the wide receiver. How often is he lining up in the slot? How often is he lining up out wide? And there was a dramatic jump from, I want to say, it was after game 10. So the last 2 regular season games and then the bowl game, his usage just skyrocketed. And they were mixing it up with him going outside, with him in the slot. As for the first 10 games of the year, this year, he was more of like a slot exclusive player. But the last 3 games kind of evened out. I think it ended up being like 76% slot, 24% out wide in terms of snap distribution. And so when you're playing that exclusively in the slot, if the Lions want to move him outside, there's going to be some development that comes with that. He's going to have to refine his run tree or his route tree. He ran a lot of bubble screens and vertical routes. Those were kind of like his thing. He did have some in-breakers on tape and some out-breakers, but I think that for the majority of his time in Arkansas, his route tree was very limited. So he's going to have to add some branches to that route tree. metaphorically speaking. But I do think there's some upside there. And I think another thing that he's going to have to work on is because he was in the slot so often, he didn't have to face a ton of press coverage. If he wants to go on the outside, he's going to get pressed at the NFL level. That's just going to happen. So I think that for him, it's about refining his ability to get off of press coverage and fine-tuning his route tree are the two things for me, because nobody's doubting his physical talent whatsoever. Again, a lot of upside there. How do they use him this year? Is it just going to be rotationally, like package-based, where maybe they bump Amon-Ra out wide and use him out of the slot where he's comfortable? Or do they just throw it at him right away, say, hey, you're here to play outside? And in that case, maybe he's pushing Tim Patrick by the end of the year. Maybe he's a guy who, like this past year at Arkansas, that snap count really starts to jump in the last quarter of the season. So, like I said, a lot of upside, a lot of athleticism, but I think there is still some refining that needs to be done with him.
Now I'm curious because a lot of people are looking at the athleticism of Miles Frazier. Do you think quickly could you see him being a replacement for Frank Ragnow in the future? He's played a lot of spots along the offensive line, but I think he said center was not one of them. But he says he can do it all. Do you see it based on film review?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a case to be made. He is athletic, he's strong, and he's versatile. So I do think that that would be something he would be super willing to pick up. Is he going to be able to do it right now, right away? No. But I do think him being a draft pick lends it to having a better chance of him making the roster, which I think he'll make the roster. And once he's on the roster, if he's a healthy scratch on game days, why not devote that practice time to him being kind of Frank Ragnow's understudy? I do think that's an avenue the Lions can take. And I thought a little bit about it since he was drafted, just because he has so much experience playing all these different spots. If there was an area where the Lions wanted him to major at center, right, he's going to be the center of the future. Maybe that means he doesn't get as many reps at guard, and that does take away the potential of him being kind of your Swiss Army knife offensive lineman from a depth perspective. But I do think that's an avenue they could certainly go with, because Frank Ragnow has been beat up the last few years, and they have looked into bringing options in behind him over the past couple seasons. Kingsley Agwakun was an undrafted free agent they brought in this past year, and then this year with Leaf Fautanu out of Arizona State is another undrafted center they've brought in to compete as well. Michael Neese has a background playing in center collegiately as well. He made the team last year. So it's not like they haven't made an effort. And I think that Miles Frazier could be a logical option in that aspect.
That's interesting because, each year that adds more wear and tear to Frank Ragnow. Look, you still got to credit Ragnow for being one of the top centers in the league. I see him probably staying this year and next, and then you got to start the opportunities to start to pay attention to who's next. So pay attention to Miles Frazier. I do think there's opportunities there, and his name is starting to generate a little bit more buzz as a potential replacement for Frank Ragnow. So now our last couple topics here. Some stir was caused online when Aidan Hutchinson had his latest workout video, and it's a situation where we got to see him a little bit more. Each workout video has been a little bit more in line with recovery. Now clearly he's not 100%, but he's now in the beginning phase of rehabbing. So it's great to see him unleashed. Great to see him running. Great to see him doing football drills, defensive end drills, moving and running at elevated speeds and elevated intensity. So I thought the video was encouraging, but some people look at it and they look at it as creature of the moment type things where they go, oh, he looks like a little bit slower, and they're concerned. But you got to remember, we are in May, June, July, August, September, 4 more months of continued workouts to heal. And I do think that I was encouraged by seeing Aidan Hutchinson's latest workout video. What was your reaction when you saw it?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there's a little bit of a hitch in the giddy up there as far as, did he look the smoothest running? No. I'm also not a medical professional. I can't tell you where he's at specifically in his rehab, but I will tell you this. He's moving around like that, and you still got 4 months left of, is his rehab going to be as intense as they start OTAs? Probably not. But he hit it hard. He hit it hard. And he had intentions of coming back and playing in the Super Bowl. And then once they didn't make it, he kind of dialed it back a little bit from the sounds of it. I think Aidan Hutchinson's going to be just fine. I think everything's going to be just fine. The progress he showed in the most recent videos that were coming out compared to where he was at when he was, running underwater. It's night and day, man. It is night and day. I think he's going to be just fine. Like I said, not a medical professional. I can't give you the ins and outs as far as, okay, the leg has to do this, this, and this. That's not me, but I will tell you this: I'm optimistic about Aidan Hutchinson in 2025 and beyond. Um, and I'm excited to get him back out there on the grass. Like, that's going to be so much fun to watch him get back out there. With the person he is, he's going to be stoked. My guess is he's probably limited at OTAs and then full go at training camp. That would just be my guess. So I think once training camp gets going and the ball gets rolling, man, he is going to be back. And I think that's going to be a lot of fun for Lions fans.
Okay, to start, Twitter Dr. Christian is downplaying his ability to evaluate what we saw on social media. That's fine. But as you continue to grow and evaluate, we can get you to Twitter Doctor status pretty soon, pretty quickly. I think that it's not going to be your trajectory as Twitter Doctor video analysis guy can definitely grow in this space. And I do think that, look, it's very fair that I think that he's in good hands. Aidan Hutchinson has rehabbed before from a catastrophic injury.
Yes,
And I think if there's somebody with the mental capacity and the strength and the gritty willingness to grind, that's the guy. So I have no concern. I think that those that were alarmists were a little bit, overreacting to what they're seeing early in his rehabilitation process. Remember, it was just now starting the ability to crank it into gear. So I do think that in the future, you'll start to see steady progress with each passing week. Now, one last thought, because we always take a look at, the roster and where it's at. Antoine Green was let go. Clearly, I thought when we started to look at the 90-man roster, there was 91 at one point. I felt like, okay, and looking at the list, Antoine Green, the former 7th-round pick, was probably the candidate that was going to be let go to get the roster to 90. That's where it sits at the moment. And I look at this roster and I say, okay, there's still room potentially to fill some holes at certain spots. Maybe even, as Brad Holmes said, as he likes to point out too, that, hey, the roster acquisition phase doesn't typically end right at the draft. You can still look at free agents. You looked at DeMarcus Walker, who had an opportunity to visit, so the Lions are aware of him, the former Bears defensive end. I do think that's the position that maybe they gather a veteran, maybe that gets cut at training camp or ends up being a surprise cut down the road. So I do think there's opportunities that the Lions will add. I'm not so certain they target a free agent at this point based on their work in the draft. There's still a couple of them out there. I thought Asante Samuel Jr. still being out there is intriguing, but I do think the Lions have a couple guys that kind of fill a similar role. Who did you look at? Which names intrigue you as potential free agents that the Lions could sign? And as always, we have to open that subject with maybe Zadarius Smith would be great. I think would invigorate the fan base. But who else is out there the Lions could add?
Yeah, so I mean, we can start with Zadarius Smith. Like, I think that's going to kind of be the saga where if he doesn't have a team lined up, whether it's the start of OTAs or the end of OTAs going into training camp, and he's still out there, I think I wouldn't be shocked. I'd put it that way. This isn't insider info, whatever. I just wouldn't be shocked if the Lions make that move, just because he's a player they're familiar with. They know he's going to fit their standards and things like that. So I wouldn't be shocked if Zadarius Smith is back in a Lions uniform. But I do think externally, looking big picture, DeMarcus Walker visited. There's some interest there. I think that he's a very high floor, low ceiling option. He's been very durable over the last few years. I think he's played all 17 games the last 3 seasons. Asante Samuel Jr. was a guy you mentioned. He was the guy I listed in my article over the weekend. Again, he's a talented corner. He's done some good things, but there were some questions about his shoulder injury last year and how it might not have been a football injury. So that to me is kind of like, does he fit? And he still doesn't have a landing spot. But again, he's another guy that is a good player. And if he doesn't have a team after OTAs, it's like, why not at least look into strengthening your cornerback room, give him a 1-year deal, and let him push some of these younger guys for spots. And then another one I thought was very interesting was Brandon Scherf, who is a tried and true right guard, guy that's been to the Pro Bowl, All-Pro at one point in his career. If you want a veteran, like a Kevin Zeitler type who can come in there and instantly elevate your offensive line, that's your guy. And if you want to make life easier on your rookies, that's your guy. So he's another one that would make a lot of sense for Detroit in terms of just strengthening that offensive line in the immediate future. He's a veteran. He can help you out on a 1-year deal. Let guys like Tate Ratledge, Miles Frazier get accustomed. I think that would lend more credence to your theory about Frazier being the center, because then that would allow him to, okay, you're not our starter or our backup. Why don't you go help us and be our backup center? So yeah, those are just some of the options I thought about. Maybe do they add another receiver to the mix? I mean, Caden Davis was a guy last year, came up on a rookie mini camp deal and ended up playing his way onto the roster for training camp and actually had a pretty solid camp. And was one of the closer guys to making the final roster. Darius Fountain, remember him last year, was a guy who had a really strong camp. So, like, there's avenues for guys to make this team at positions like wide receiver or offensive line. Maybe tight end is another one where they looking to bring in a veteran. I know they did that with Frazier. And then there's one more, Parker Hess. Yes, Parker Hess was a guy who made the team after coming in on a rookie mini camp deal last year. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different avenues for guys to make this Lions roster, but I think those positions, whether it's offensive guard, tight end, or defensive line, are like the big three of where you can look at them and go, okay, yeah, there's a place for somebody new on this roster.
No doubt. Always opportunities for players also to get a spot on the practice squad. Those spots are open. Those 16 spots are open for the Detroit Lions, and those are key spots too that could end up leading a pathway for a player to get to the National Football League and play because of the, just every single down there's a risk of injury. So the Lions do value the practice squad, and they call them the vet squad, and they definitely take stock in and invest in those players that are spending time practicing with the Detroit Lions. Make sure you follow us at Detroit Podcast. Always enjoy the time I get to spend with Christian. Christian, I just got to remind you, on a side note, that when Michigan decided to look at their schedule, they looked and they said, "Oh, we're playing Central. Let's just allow a self-imposed suspension to happen against Central." I don't know if you take
huge
that.
mistake, by the way, big time mistake. Right? They don't know what they do not know what Matt Drinkle is bringing to Ann Arbor.
Oh, look at Christian!
Listen, I am all aboard the Matt Drinkle hype train. Central Michigan football, we are so back. We are back.
Oh, okay. Okay. So
I'm all aboard. I might be the conductor.
Christian sold on Central's program. Listen, I can't tell you. I don't know. All I know is I like to make fun of them. Clearly, I have a little bit of unresolved anger for certain reasons regarding the Central program. So I will be poking them as much as possible because of their still lack of accountability for a certain individual. So I'll let you remind you. But Sharon Moore decided I could take a vacation against Central. Maybe they are back, and maybe Central will make them pay and not lose by 35. So
real quick on that, Sharon Moore, former CMU football staffer, by the way.
Oh, okay.
He was either the O-line coach or the tight ends coach a few years ago before he went to Michigan. So what's up with that, man? Come on.
We'll see.
That is a big mistake. Matt Drinkle is that guy for CMU. We're coming to Ann Arbor.
Okay, Christian's on all aboard. So we'll see. I have it now saved. You put that out there on the air. So we'll see what that contest looks like without Sharon Moore. Maybe you guys now have a chance to make Chippewa football slightly relevant and even get to my radar. Guys, make sure you follow us at Detroit Podcast, where the Lone Wolves podcast, you can find great guests, Christian bringing a lot of the inside analysis as well, doing film reviews, breaking news as well, daily videos, stories, videos, highlights, podcasts, everything that you need to know, free, available at Lions on SI and the hub at Detroit Podcast. Message, thank you for your support of the Matt Derry interview, Christian and I's draft recap. Very much fun. And also visit the YouTube channel. We now have a Lions on SI YouTube channel, videos uploaded every day, all our thoughts, clips from this podcast. You can find it there. Subscribe. You can get in and have opportunities to win giveaways if you are a subscriber of the Lions on SI YouTube channel. Thanks, everybody. I look forward to firing it up maybe a little bit later this week ahead of rookie minicamp, and for sure next week to recap everything that we saw this weekend with the Detroit Lions.